evening. Welcome to day 25 of 30 days of real estate content in Nigeria. My name is John Olisan. I'm the CEO of Red Diamond Properties Limited, my property development firm in Abuja, and our services cut across property development, property brokerage, property management, and the likes. And in the last 24 days, I've educated you on so many different aspects of real estate. I've been on a property education, real estate education series, and we are hopeful to get to 30 days of real estate content. Today is day 25. And today I'm going to be continuing in my property education real estate series. I've shared so much which you can get on here on Facebook, or you can go to my YouTube page, John Olisa, where you can get so much on real estate, different aspects of real estate, about 12 aspects I've discussed, to the different land titles, to how to identify scams in real estate, how to avoid them. And I've also spoken about the landlord and tenants law of Lagos State. Today, I want to continue more on the legal aspect of real estate in this property education series. And I just want to educate you on the Land Use Act. Now, first off, you need to know that the Land Use Act is one of the most important, if not the most important, land real estate property legislation in Nigeria. To a very great extent, next to the Constitution, which talks a bit about right to own property and some other things, the Land Use Act is the major legislation on real estate in Nigeria. So today, in my typical, simple to understand, straightforward basic education, I'm going to be doing like a section by section understanding or explanation of the Land Use Act. It was passed into law during the military regime of General Obasanjo in 1978, and it has been the primary legislation. Prior to that, what we had was land tenure laws, where land was owned by the locales of the north, the south, the east. They held it in land tenure, freehold, holding it in perpetuity. But there were disputes, issues, not wanting to give land to people who needed it, and so many other things that now led to the Land Use Act. Though the Land Use Act is not perfect, right? But it has turned out to be the most important land legislation in Nigeria. It's a 52-section legislation, and I'll just be taking you few things you need to know about it. I'll start today and by God's grace continue tomorrow. If need be, take it into Saturday. But let me just share a few things you need to know. From section 1, you need to know that the Land Use Act states that all the lands in a state are vested ideally in the governor, who is a trustee of the land, and is to apportion the land for the best use of the citizens of Nigeria. So a trustee is somebody who does not own something, but he holds it on behalf of other people. So the Land Use Act now vests all the land in a state in the governor of the state, and the governor now has the duty, the right to allocate it to people upon request. So that is what you need to know from section 1. And from section 2, we have two kinds of land, sort of urban land. That's one classification, which is under the control of the governor. And the next one is non-urban land, which is under the control of the local government. For the urban land, there is something called a land use allocation committee, which works hand in hand with the governor in allocating land to people when they need it, right? And while for the non-urban land, we have what we call land allocation advisory committee. So you need to know they are the ones that play a critical role in control of land of the state. And these bodies, they advise on land matters, and they also advise on compensation. Because sometimes when government is taking land from the locals, government do not just strip them of their rights. So if government is taking land from the locals who own it, right, they have to pay them sometimes compensation. Yes, compensation. So government did not just appropriate the land, take it by force from the locals who were the original owners, settlers of the land, without settling them. So you need to know And some of these old laws um, that were in operation before the Land Use Act, some of them still have some effect, but they must align with the law, which is called the Land Use Act. That is what Section 4 says. And Section 5 states some of the duties of a governor in relation to land. One, he grants what we call statutory right of occupancy. And the document that encapsulates that grant is called CFO, Certificate of Occupancy. That Section 5 also gives the governor the right to charge rent on the land. Now you need to know, under the Land Use Act, what we have is called rights of occupancy. People no longer own land freehold, that is in perpetuity, holding land forever. No. You have a right to ownership of the land. Ideally, the maximum ownership or possession you have of the land through a CFO is 99 years. So you don't own it like in some other countries where you have freehold land for 1,000 years or till eternity. So a grant of statutory right of occupancy is one of the rights of the governor that he can do. He can also charge what we call rent, ground rent. So many times people do not know. They think once they have the land, they have it forever. But they still charge the government imposes on the land for use of the land. You will even see it in a document called the Certificate of Occupancy, and it's called ground rent, and it's payable on a yearly basis. That's why if you see in the FCT, many lands have been revoked or undergoing revocation for failure to pay ground rent for many years. So many people do not know about that. But as they say that ignorance of the law is not a defense. So the governor has the ability to determine the rate of ground rent and can also revoke allocation of land on certain grounds. One of which is your inability to align, your inability to follow what has been stated in the Certificate of Occupancy. Because when a land is given to you by land, there are certain terms and conditions that are stated on the Certificate of Occupancy, and you have a duty to align with those obligations stated. And when you go against it, the governor can penalize you for those breaches. Now, Section 6 talks about the powers of local government in allocating land. Remember, I said local governments can also allocate land, generally called non-urban land. And the allocation is called customary right of occupancy, which is where we get what we call the ROO, right of occupancy. And they allocate land for few purposes, agricultural purposes, and also rural houses. Now, as regards the allocation, they don't do it arbitrarily. If it's for agricultural purposes, the maximum size of land that can be allocated is 500 hectares. A hectare of land is 10,000 square meters. So the maximum the law says that the local government can allocate is 500 hectares if it's for agricultural purposes. But if it's for grazing purposes, it is 5,000 hectares. 5,000 hectares. So you need to know that. That's what Section 6 says. Section 7 now talks about minors. Generally, an adult in Nigeria is somebody who is above 18 years. But the Land Use Act has a different definition. So under the Land Use Act, which is the basic land law legislation, you must be above 21 before you can hold land directly. So before you can get allocation of land directly, or even hold property, you must be above 21. If you are below 21, you cannot get land or property. The only exception is when you now get it through somebody who we call a trustee or a guardian. A trustee or a guardian. So that's what you need to know. And Section 8 also talks about some conditions that can be attached to a land. Section 9 talks more about certificate of occupancy. Section 10 talks about, again, payment of rent and payment for improvement. Section 11 talks about inspection. You need to realize that the fact that you own land does not mean you own it to the exclusion of everybody, and nobody can enter your land. Yes, people cannot breach your ownership of land, right? People cannot encroach your land. But under Section 11, the government still has the power to come and inspect your land. And the government also, on your land, can allow for extraction of sand or gravel on your land. It's also expected of you, as the owner of land, to have what we call beacons. Beacons are sort of survey marks that show the boundaries of your land. So the law mandates that you have such survey vacancy. It's very important. And as owner of the land, it's just to reiterate, you have exclusive ownership of the land except against the governor. So it's only the governor or the government that can come and inspect your land. And a bystander, just anybody, a development company cannot just come into your land. No. By having a right of occupancy, statutory right of occupancy, customary right of occupancy, you have exclusive possession or right to your land, except against the governor. So let me now talk more about rents that you pay on land. Remember I talked about ground rent. That says the rent that's payable on land. Right? Let me talk more about it. And the rent that is chargeable on the land, you need to realize that it is usually chargeable based, the rate is usually chargeable based on the location and comparable land, right? But you also need to be aware that the governor can sometimes reduce the rate of the rent or even give it free of charge, right? And as I said, if you do not pay the rent as a when due, there'll be an issue. You need to know when you own land. Many times we have issues with land where people just buy land and keep. And that's what we call is land banking. Many people use for land banking. But you need to be aware under the law that if you fail to develop your land, you are taking a risk. Because failure to develop your land is a ground for the government, for the governor to revoke the certificate of occupancy, to revoke the right of occupancy you have under the land. So you need to be aware of that. You also need to know that you will pay an extra rent on your land if you transfer your land without the governor's consent. And you need to know for every transfer of land, whether through assignment, whether through transfer, whether through mortgage, the provision of the law is that the consent of the governor or the local government chairman must be gotten. Failure to get that consent can make that transaction of transfer voidable. So it's very important that you know that. So you cannot sell your land, you cannot mortgage it, you cannot transfer it without the governor's consent. It is mandatory. Even when you are subleasing the land, right, it is still needed. It is still needed. Governor's consent is still very important in transfer of land. And let me just talk about two more things before I call it a day. And by God's grace, continue tomorrow on the Land Use Act. Remember, as I said, in as much as we have the Land Use Act, the government still has land that belongs to locals. The original owners of the land, the ones that got it through inheritance. Many times they have the ownership of the land through what we call Land Excision Gazette, where the government returns a part of the ownership, part of the land they originally owned before they coming into operation of the Land Use Act and giving it back to them. And such land, you need to know, is governed by customary law or other law, right? And under what we call wills and deeds, a will is a document stating how a person wants their property to be shared upon their death, upon their demise. Land also can, under such will, land cannot be divided arbitrarily. Land cannot be divided arbitrarily. And I just want to end with this. That's by the provision of Section 26, which states any transaction that you do under the Land Use Act that does not go in conformity with the Act is null and void. So it is nugatory, just like a waste. So the whole idea behind this property education series is for you to have general knowledge about real estate. For me as a person, even beyond being the CEO of Red Diamond Properties, I've come to see one of the greatest things you can do to yourself is to improve your knowledge bank. And I've come to see that every country has rules and regulations that guide its affairs. So just being a lawyer, well, I already have the advantage being a lawyer. I just try to understand every legislation that affects my business. So since I'm in real estate, I try to read every land legislation, from Land Use Act to Landlord and Tenancy Law to Recovery of Premises Act. That one is in relation to real estate. But there's still other laws that affect me, like the tax laws, the Nigerian Tax Act, the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, the Nigerian Revenue Service Act, the Joint Revenue Board Act. I just read this regulation because the more I know about the law, the more it guides my affairs. I've come to see many times, we say in Nigeria, we say it's a lawless country. We are not lawless. I've come to see that many times it is in the breach of a law that you are now aware of the existence of the law. You don't know a law is in existence. You don't know a law is operational, but when you now breach it, it's now when you know. It is when the law comes against you. For instance, many people do not know it's an offense to spread the Naira note or step on the Naira note. But when the law started penalizing people, that's when people now knew. So for me, when I'm doing this educational series, I just want you to be aware of these laws. The more you are aware, somewhere in your subconscious, when you're doing a real estate transaction, even when you have not gotten your lawyer, yes, get your lawyer to help you in every real estate transaction, right? But even before getting your real estate lawyer, you're already aware that this is what I need to know. This is what I need to do, right? So I don't run afoul the law. So that's why I'm giving you free value on real estate law. Because I've been saying this over the last 24 days. The number one rule of investment is this. Before you invest money in any investment, firstly, invest money in acquiring knowledge about the investment. And which is what I'm doing, except that I'm not charging you money. I'm giving you free value, free knowledge, legal knowledge, business knowledge on real estate in Nigeria. And the more you know, I keep saying it, the more you know, the higher the likelihood of your success. The more you know, the higher the likelihood of your success. And the less you know, the higher the likelihood of your failure. So I'm just giving you this so you can succeed in real estate in Nigeria. And I'm so grateful to those of you who have stayed consistent with me over the last 24 days. Today is day 25. And I've been adding so much value to you. I've talked about the Land Use Act. And for those of you who could not join us today, you can go to my Facebook page right here, watch it. I'll also upload it to my YouTube page where you can watch it. Like, comment, share, subscribe to it. Yes, you can watch it and get so much value and share with people. Remember, knowledge is power. Knowledge is light. Yes, knowledge is light. I remain John Olisa, the CEO of Red Diamond Properties Limited, my property development firm. And recently we launched our first estate in Abuja in Kuje, Genesis Court. And with 200 square meters going for 1.5 million, you can buy and build on the land a 3-bedroom terrace duplex. The 300 square meters going for 2.2 million, you can build a 4-bedroom semi-detached duplex. While with 400 square meters going for 3 million, you can build a 5-bedroom fully detached duplex. And with a 1,000 square meter land going for 7 million, you can build a 6-unit block of flat, 2 units each of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom. For more information, you can contact me on +234 813 799 0792, +234 813 799 0792. You can also send an email to us at reddiamondproperties10@gmail.com. reddiamondproperties10@gmail.com. So thank you to everyone watching us today. I appreciate you, and I know you've gotten so much value. So keep following me on my Facebook page, John Olisa. You can follow our real estate page, Red Diamond Properties, for so much value on real estate. If there's anything, I can assure you that if you follow me, I will give you practical, easy to use, applicational value in real estate that you can utilize. So thank you so very much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. There's a high likelihood tomorrow, being 20th of March, we'll have this Facebook Live in the morning, not in the evening like we've been having it. So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you so very much for joining me. Have a wonderful evening and good night. Bye.